Good evening, daywalkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. Thanks for joining in, all you folks out there on the Edge Radio US as well as iHeartRadio. Glad to have you jumping on board this evening. Facebook's giving me all kinds of little pointers and tips right here. Let me get rid of this real quick. Okay, we're good to go. Hope everything is going okay this evening with all you folks. And as usual, got to give those shout outs to all of those awesome sponsors out there. We got Raw Ink from New Orleans, Louisiana. The cool cats that put all of the Louisiana legends on t-shirts. You can find their Etsy shop at authorlyngibson.com and use code horror queen to get you a nice little discount so you can shop to your little heart's content. Casey Klein, glad to see you joining in this evening, sweetheart. Thank you so much for helping to promote the show. I appreciate it. Beware for trolls out there this evening. I hope Glenn has updated you. I'm sorry I have not done so. Hopefully we won't have any issues this evening. Karen Mathis, who has already had her encounter with the troll. Hope all is well with you. How's the volume out there tonight, guys? Glenn Harrison told me last week it was a little bit low. I think I've got it situated this evening. How's it working for you? Y'all hear me all right and everything? Hey, Tyler, thanks for joining in this evening. Also, got to give that shout out to Big Time Vapes in Picayune, Mississippi. You can find them at 711 Memorial Boulevard if you are looking to kick the habit or pounds. They can hook you up. Go check them out. They've got all the mods, all the gear, all the supplies, pieces, parts, and the best juice you can find on the market. Hi, nice to see you this evening. Thanks for joining in. There's my girl Michelle. Thank you, sweetheart. Been missing you. Hope all is good with you. Also got to give a shout out to our new sponsor at the Edge Radio US. Hey, Freddie, good to see you. Thank you. Use Basic Motorsports. That is where you can get all your high performance parts at very good deals. They always have all kinds of specials going on. Check them out. You can also find their link at authorlyngibson.com. Get you a nice little discount, free shipping. We've got it like that. Racer Direct is another one of our lovely sponsors. Got to give that shout out to them. And also Naked Wines. Yes, you know I've always got my Naked Wines right here next to me. Drinking up. Somebody's going to get naked. Hopefully for you, that'll be a good thing. Casey says the volume is much better. I just can't fathom anybody ever having a hard time hearing me. I usually don't even need microphones when I hold panels. Everybody in the room can hear me. But that's cool. I'm glad we got it all worked out this evening and y'all can hear everything that's going on because we got a couple really cool legends we're going to go over tonight. I've been promoting them as vampire legends, but I'm going to leave that up to you guys. Stacy and John, thank you so much for joining in. There's my girl Sandra. Hope y'all are doing well this evening. I got all my creepy kids joining in with me tonight. That's awesome. I love the way y'all play together too. Let's scroll down just a little bit more. Michelle says she's going to be at the French Quarter in July. Michelle, you may have to look me up, sweetheart. We'll see what's going on. There's my paranormal big brother from another mother. And we're both drinking a wine. And you said the wine is from like the same region and it's the same basic blend. Yes, we are both very happy this evening. I'm going to try to say this. I'm going to stumble through it. Like I told you, you know a lot more about wine than I do. I just know my limit is like a bottle and a half. Pinot Noir. Is that right? Am I close? Anywhere near that? It's a light wine. It's not a Merlot. I can say that. Merlot comes out a lot easier. But that goes down pretty good too. I'm digging it. Okay, so like I said, a couple of legends we're going to go over this evening. I probably forgot a couple sponsors because I'm still a little rusty. This is the third show back after a little hiatus. So thank you guys for all coming back and supporting me. I appreciate that. Facebook didn't notify me. I was scrolling and I'm glad you ran across me, Stacy. Yes, I don't think Facebook is loving me too much these days. I must be like the black sheep again. Go figure. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to leave this up to your discretion on whether you're going to classify these legends as vampire legends or not. But pay very close attention, especially to this first one that we're going to talk about. There's a lot of dates and names in here, a lot of names that I'm probably going to screw up pretty bad, but pay attention to those. It's very interesting. And some of these names and dates are kind of going to coincide with the second legend, which has nothing to do with this first one. So, some of you guys may or may not have heard of the Compte St. Germain. Yes, sounds a little bit familiar, especially if you're in the New Orleans area. You're going to see that name on a street sign or two, I do believe. But let me tell you about this guy. Very interesting. I've looked into him more than once, and it seems like every time I dig into him a little bit further, I find more. Very, very interesting. Like I said, pay attention to the dates, children. Take notes. There'll be a test here at the end. Never. Okay, so this dude, the Comte de Saint Germain, Jacques, was said to have been born in 1712. Now, of course, the details of his birth and life as a child are pretty obscure because that was like way back in the day, and they didn't have all this digital stuff back then. It was like scrolls and bricks and rocks and cave etchings, and yeah, no, it wasn't really quite that bad. But anyway, they say that this dude was the son of Francis Rakoczy II, which just happened to be the Prince of Transylvania. Now, there are two other recorded statements that kind of contradict this. But check it out, y'all. One was by this dude named Rameau, who was some kin to a French ambassador from Venice, so a reputable gentleman here. Well, this dude said that he knew Saint Germain in 1710 and that he appeared to be in his early 50s. Now, the second statement can be found in Souvenirs sur Marie Antoinette. Now, this chick named Madame Admar, she actually agrees with Rameau that Germain's description was pretty much the same, but she said that she knew him as the Marquis de Montferrat. So a couple of different identities, but apparently his appearance was the same. Age being the specific thing here that we're looking at. Glenn's talking about our wine. He's very educated when it comes to wine and a lot of other things, paranormal, because that's why he is the fearless leader of hardcore paranormal. If you need a group you need to join where you can ask questions and not be ridiculed, definitely check them out. They have some really cool panels, a lot of fun stuff going on there. They're very organized, more so than me. Tons and tons of members, a lot of experienced and helpful people there. Wayla, good to see you. Garden's looking wonderful. I'm jealous. Okay, so with all these skills that this dude had, Germain I'm talking about, he's very well known and even had a bunch of groupies that kind of followed him around. But nobody really knew him. See, he was very wealthy, very handsome, and all that good stuff, and he was very well known in society by the mid 1700s. Now, this dude had the reputation of being a courtier, a composer, a musician, a priest, and a prophet, and he was also fluent in several languages, which kind of allowed for him to buddy up with all these noblemen from different countries. And Germain, of course, was also very well versed in science and alchemy. So yeah, he had his groupies that followed him around, and he did all kind of dinner parties and stuff. But he was also a very talented musician, and he actually put on a couple of public performances. Now, one of these performances was in London in 1749, and a lot of the folks that showed up for that concert said that he was way too great of a musician not to become famous. Now, we're going to drop a couple more names here. This chick, Lady Jemima York, yeah, sounds familiar, huh? Well, she was in attendance in London, and she was quoted to have said that Germain was a very odd creature, and that the more she saw of him, the more she was curious to know something of him, and that he was also everything to everyone. Sounds like she had the hots for Germain, right? Also in attendance in this audience was Lord Walpole. And he described Germain as extremely pale with very dark hair and a matching beard. Now, Walpole also added that Germain dressed magnificently and that he had several jewels all over him, which indicated that he was very wealthy, and he was kind of insinuating that he was getting paid the big bucks by somebody. Now, in 1748, Germain was hired by King Louis XV for diplomatic missions. Remember that. 1748, he was hired by King Louis XV for diplomatic missions. Okay, that's going to be important later on. On one of these missions, he was a guest of Giacomo Casanova, along with a bunch of other well-respected French nobles. Now, Casanova described his first encounter with Germain in his memoirs. He wrote, "The most enjoyable dinner I had was with Madame de Robert Gurgy." Told you I'm going to screw some of these names up. That chick came with this famous adventurer that was known by the name of Count de Saint Germain. This individual, instead of eating, talked from the beginning of the meal to the end. And I followed his example in one respect, as I did not eat, but I listened to him with the greatest attention. It may safely be said that as controversial as he was an unequaled conversationalist. Now, Saint Germain sold himself quite well as a marvel with his tales of amazement. Who wouldn't be in awe of this dude, right? He's good looking, he's a scholar, he's a linguist, he's a musician, he's a chemist. He's a perfect ladies' man. And if old Jacques was courting you, you definitely got the royal treatment. Now, his ladies, for a while, of course, they got flattered, and he gave them a lot of gifts. Among those gifts were paints and cosmetics that he had actually engineered. Now, he never promised to make any of them young again. As a matter of fact, he even confessed that that was well beyond his means, that he couldn't actually do that. But he did promise them that their beauty would be preserved by means of a wash, which he said cost him a lot of money, but he gave it away to him for no charge, just as a gift. Okay, here we go with another year, children. Pay attention. In 1762, Germain goes to Russia, and legend says that there he was involved in this conspiracy that resulted in placing Catherine the Great on the throne. Well, later on, he winds up in a position where he's actually advising her commander of the imperial armies in a war against Turkey, which they won. In 1774, he goes back to France while Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette held the throne. He met with them to share a warning. He had foreseen the impending revolution. 1779, he shows up in Germany, where he became friends with Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel. He lived there in that castle as a guest for the next 5 years, so he's pretty well documented that he was there. Okay, kids, here's one of the kickers. The local records there stated that Germain died on the castle grounds on February 27, 1784. But in 1785, he was still being seen all around Germany. As a matter of fact, he was hanging out with this dude named Anton Mesmer, which was the pioneer of hypnosis. Now, it's said that Germain had actually given Mesmer the basic ideas for hypnotism and personal magnetism. Of course he had that, right? And check this out. In 1785, it is recorded in the official records of the Freemasonry that Saint Germain had been chosen as their representative for the annual 1785 convention. So obviously this is either one hell of a weekend at Bernie's, or the dude's not dead, or he's undead. 4 years later, in 1789, after the taking of Bastille in the French Revolution, Germain goes back to France to counsel with the Comtesse Admar. Remember that name from earlier, y'all. Now, she makes notes of this meeting in her memoirs as well. She said that the two of them had a very in-depth conversation about the future of France. Then in 1821, there was another entry in her journal, and she wrote, I have seen Saint Germain again. Each time, to my amazement, I saw him with the Queen Antoinette uh, before she was murdered and after she was murdered on the 18th of Brumaire. On the day following the death of the Duke of Enghien, I don't do French, y'all, I do Red Knight, and January of 1815, and on the eve of the murder of Duke de Berry. The last time she saw him was in 1820, and each time he looked to be a man no older than in his mid-40s. In 1821, Germain took on a new identity. Now, Major Fraser had apparent wealth, but he lived alone and he never alluded to having any family. Of course, he was very well known throughout the community as a knowledgeable and very well traveled man, but one day Germain's cover was blown by Albert Van Dam, who wrote of having met a man that bore a very striking resemblance to Count de Saint Germain. In his memoirs is written, he called himself Major Fraser, lived alone, and was without family. Moreover, he was lavish with money, though the source of his fortune remained a mystery to everyone. He possessed a marvelous knowledge of all the countries in Europe at all periods. His memory was absolutely incredible, and curiously enough, he often gave his hearers to understand that he had acquired his learning elsewhere other than from books. Many is the time he has told me with a very strange smile that he was certain he had known Nero and had spoken with Dante, and so on. Well, Major Fraser disappears without a trace. So yeah, Germain is gone again, just for a little while, because between the years of 1880 and 1900, there were two more documented references to Saint Germain. This I'm going to foul up, so I'm going to take it very slow and see if maybe I can get it out without that. Hold on, this is going to help. I'm certain will, right, Glenn? John Biggins says that somebody who looked like him was passing himself off as him. Maybe. Doubter. John Biggins is a doubter. I think Germain's a vampire, but that's just my included a famous mystic by the name of Helena Blavatsky in 1882. Now, she claimed that Saint Germain was alive and well and was working toward the spiritual development of the West. So, she also claimed that Saint Germain belonged to a race of immortals which lived somewhere north of the Himalayas. Now, this Theosophical Society was originally founded in New York in 1875. Now, Blavatsky later established the international headquarters outside the suburbs of Madras, where it still stands today. In 1886, she fell very ill and nearly died, but somehow she made this astounding recovery. Is it just a coincidence that Germain was said to have been in the area at that very same time? Now, we know this because there is said to be a genuine photo that is still in existence today of Germain and Blavatsky together. Blavatsky was said to have moved to London immediately after her recovery, but nobody really knows for sure where she went. That chick is still in the wind somewhere. All right, folks, here's another date for you. Think about this. We started out when? In the 1700s? Okay. In 1897, a famous French singer by the name of Emma Calvi claims that she had an affair with Saint Germain. Now, you might just think this chick was thrown off if it weren't for the fact that there is an autographed self-portrait that she gave to Germain that is still in existence today. Hi, Denise. Nice to see you this evening. Thanks for tuning in. All right. So this is where it gets a little bit more in my neck of the woods. In 1902, a flamboyant man in his mid-40s that went by the name of Jacques St. Germain moves into a very prestigious building on the corner of Royal and Ursaline, which is still standing today. Jacques was said to have migrated from France. So, the dude gets here, he gets settled in, and immediately throws this huge and very lavish party. Because what else are you going to do in New Orleans, right? Well, among all these attendees, of course, were the dignitaries and the politicians and the most elite that New Orleans had to offer back in the day. Jacques fed his guests off the finest of china and the best of silverware, though he himself did not eat. There was quite a rabble about all that. It actually pissed off a lot of his guests that he didn't sit down and eat with them. I don't know if they thought maybe he was feeding them inferior food, or maybe that he was trying to poison them. I don't know what was going through their mind, but it offended a lot of his guests. Now, it was obvious that Jacques was a lot wealthier than most of the elite there in the city. But most of the community didn't really care too much for him. They weren't very welcoming. As a matter of fact, they kind of steered clear of him. I don't know if maybe their vampire radars were going off or what the deal is. And John Biggins is saying Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, and Star Trek all had episodes about guys who live forever. This is better, though, because it's true. Hey, Ed Miller, nice to see you this evening. See, Ed Miller says vampire. I'm gonna let you take on John Biggins over there on the side, Ed. School him up. Vampire John. Okay, so Jacques pretty much kept to himself during the day. Nobody really saw him hanging out in the yard or standing on the balcony waving like it's Mardi Gras or nothing like that. But when nighttime came, he was seen very frequently among the crowds walking around on Bourbon Street. Yes, they did that back in the day too. Well, one night he's chilling with a bunch of the drunky drunks, and he picks up this chick and he brings her home with him. And later on that evening, that same girl was found sprawled out on the cobblestone street, screaming at the top of her lungs with both of her legs broken. So the police show up and they haul her off to the hospital. Of course, they're trying to write their report while she's screaming and sobbing and hollering all kind of craziness. Well, she starts telling them that while she was over at Germain's house, she'd leaned over to look at some whatnots or something that he had sitting on his fireplace mantle. And then all of a sudden, Germain comes charging after her like with this inhuman speed, and he tackles her and he pins her to the fire mantle, and he starts violently biting at her neck. And at that very same moment, somebody starts banging on the front door. Luckily for her, right? So Germain, of course, is distracted, and he goes down to see who's banging on his door, and it's a bunch of his drunk friends that came to go fetch him to go out for a night of drinking. So the girl was in such a freaked out state that she didn't dare go out of the same door that Germain went out of. I guess she figured maybe she might run into him in the hall. So she thought the quickest and the easiest way to get the hell out of Germain's house was to go out the window and over the balcony and land in the brick street below. So that's what she did. And that's how she wound up breaking both of her legs. Okay, now you guys got to keep in mind that Germain at this point is not quite as well known as the LaLaurie's were, but he's every bit as prestigious, every bit as well respected in the community, because the elites are hanging out there and they're seeing that he's way out of their grasp. So the police go over to question Germain. Of course, they're not trying to get in the house, they're just sitting there chatting to him. Well, Germain tells him that the girl was drunk and that she just jumped out the window for no reason. Of course, they're wanting to believe him, so I'm sure they did at some point. And not wanting to mess up his evening out with his buddies, they asked him if he would come into the police station the next morning and make a full report. Of course, Jacques is amiable and he agrees to do that, but our boy Jacques never shows up the next day. And when the police went to pay him a visit, Jacques and most of his belongings were long gone. So the police report showed that they went into the house and that they found blood stains all over the home. And upon further inspection, they discovered that there was absolutely no food at all within this house. Only a very large collection of wine glasses and bottles, which appeared to be filled with red wine. But they checked it out just a little bit further and they determined that it was actually a mixture of red wine and blood. John Biggins, vampire, vampire. So, you think the story ends there? No, it doesn't. In August of 1914, in the early days of World War I, these two Bavarian soldiers captured this Jewish-looking Frenchman who they reportedly claimed was behaving very oddly and he was dressed kind of weird. Well, they start interrogating him, and after an all-night interrogation, the man stubbornly refuses to give his name. So at sunrise, they write in their report that the prisoner starts getting highly irritated and he starts ranting about the futility of war. And he was quoted in their notes as saying, "Throw down your guns, the war is going to end in 1918 with the defeat of the German nation and her allies." Well, one of these soldiers kind of laughed at his rantings, but the other one kind of found his prophecies intriguing and he let him go on just to see what else he had to say. Well, the prisoner was then further quoted having said, "Everyone will be a millionaire after the war. There will be so much money that people will throw it from the windows and no one will bother to pick it up. After the confetti money will come the Antichrist, a tyrant from the lower level classes that will wear an ancient symbol. He will lead Germany into another global war in 1939, but will be defeated 6 years later after doing inhumane and unspeakable things." It was then reported that the Frenchman began to rant incoherently while crying and singing, and at this point the soldiers determined that the man was absolutely insane and they released him to go on his way. And again, he disappeared into obscurity. Then, in 1926, Theosophist C.W. Ledbetter, then president of the Theosophical Society, claimed to have met Germain in Rome. Now, Ledbetter maintained that Germain had shown him this robe that had been previously owned by a very famous and well-known Roman emperor. When Ledbetter inquired as to where Germain was residing, Germain responded that one of his residences was a castle in Transylvania. And one more date on this list. And remember, folks, we started out in the very, very early 1700s. Legend has it that Jacques returned to New Orleans in 1933. And we kind of have to assume that there may be a seed of truth to that, as NOLA police were called to Royal Street several times on several consecutive nights where they found several women with their throats torn out and they were drained of their blood. A witness just happened to look up and see a suspect. He said it was a man with dark hair and a dark beard that seemed to have no problem whatsoever scaling a 12-foot wall to make his escape. Okay, John, I know I've screamed vampire at you. Ed Miller, Mr. Rogers? Who's Mr. Rogers? Not It's a Wonderful Day in the Neighborhood, Mr. Rogers. He's not a vampire. Didn't he die here recently? Definitely not a vampire. Yes, Brent Swanter did a fantastic article. You can find that on Hardcore Paranormal. Glenn may actually put it back up on the timeline. So if you guys want to read something that's done a lot more professionally than my research, definitely read that. Brent is a fantastic writer. I love reading his work. I love reading Glenn Harrison's work too. He needs to get back on a keyboard and get back to work, Glenn. After that bottle of wine, right? I gotcha. Okay, so once again, I'm not going to push the V word on you guys. Not that word, Glenn. The vampire word. Um, you guys can figure for yourself if y'all want to call it that. But remember earlier I told you there were some names and some dates that I wanted you to pay attention to. I actually didn't realize there may be some collaboration between these two legends until I was going over my notes this afternoon. Now John Biggins is all into Saint Germain and he wants to do an interview with a vampire, don't we all? Okay, so just check this out and tell me what you think. Send me some messages later and also send me some requests for some upcoming shows, anything that you might like for me to delve into. Chances are I might have already gone there and done that, so it'd be kind of cool. I already have some material. So don't be afraid to ask for a topic. Stacy gave me a good one a while back, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Did some research into that. That's some scary shit going on over there. We like scary shit here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show. Okay, so you guys might have heard of the Ursaline Convent. Ursaline, gee, isn't that the same street that Compte St. Germain's house is on in the French Quarter? Well, this legend originates sometime around, what, 1727? When King Louis XV of France, wait a minute. That's like the dude that Germain went to work for at some point, wasn't it? Oh, very interesting. Well, anyway, King Louis decides he's going to send a group of Ursuline nuns to New Orleans to establish a hospital and a school for young children. So this original building was designed by Ignace Nicolas Brutine, who was the chief engineer of Louisiana, and an architect named André de Batz. That name ought to sound a little bit familiar. So the construction was actually complete in 1734, and that's when the Ursuline nuns moved in. Now, the building was made out of half timber, which was known as colombage. And this type of wooden exterior wall is usually covered with stucco or clay, which they didn't do, thinking that would be the best end result for a building in Louisiana. But, yeah, that didn't really happen because, yeah, Louisiana elements are pretty brutal. So this building starts to deteriorate, and by 1744, it was about to collapse on itself. So Brutine finds himself having to do a rebuild. Well, by 1751, the new Ursuline convent was complete, and the first floor was used mostly as a dormitory with classrooms and a refectory and an infirmary for the orphanage. The second floor had living quarters for the nuns, a library, another infirmary, must have been a whole lot of sick folks around there, and some storerooms. And the staircase that is still there today is believed to be from the original convent. Just a little footnote there if you're ever out there and checking the place out. So it was about the only part of the building that actually didn't crumble, the original building, that is. Now, during this time originates the legend of the Casket Girls. You guys have heard of that, huh? Really no such thing as a bad vampire tale. I agree, Glenn. Absolutely. So, the port of New Orleans back in the day. Get your mind out of the French Quarter, and there's this paddle boats and all beautiful paddle boats and casinos and stuff like that now. Think way back. The port is a freaking madhouse. The streets are deafening. There's men shouting back and forth. There's the stomping hooves of horses pulling carriages with those big old wooden or metal wheels that are gnashing against these cobblestone streets. Of course, there's a chorus of noise typically found at the port. the paddle boats, the cargo ships, the scraping of wooden crates being loaded and unloaded, the barrage of howling let out by dock workers as they laid their eyes on a group of young women that were making their way off the La Nouvelle Orleans. Yeah, these poor girls were freaking the hell out. So their guardians at that time were rushing them down this wooden plank into these filth-ridden streets. Each of them are absolutely terrified, but at the same time, they're still eager to explore this new and fairly unknown colony because God only knows what they were told to make them want to come over to this place now, right? So this wasn't exactly an everyday occurrence, and for the folks that had settled in New Orleans at this point, these ladies really didn't look anything like the women folk that they were used to. And to further their curiosity, each one of these girls were carrying these small wooden boxes that actually looked like little coffins. I want one of those. Anyway, every single one of these girls had been handpicked by the Bishop of Quebec by order of the French king. Now, these young women, they were all of appropriate age. I don't know exactly what that means back in the day. They might have been 13 because we say appropriate is 18 now. So they were considered ripe, somewhere between 13 and 18. Anyway, and they had very appropriate backgrounds. And they'd all been sent here with one common goal: to make a good match and marry one of these French colonists from the new Louisiana territory. Well, the locals didn't exactly welcome them with open arms, and immediately these rumors start circulating about their origination and their intentions, where the hell they come from, why the hell are they here. So the local French dudes take one look at these chicks and they start muttering about how pale these girls are. They were sickly, there was something wrong with them. And they were absolutely turned off by the fact that their skin turned red and started blistering almost immediately upon the sun being exposed to their skin. So, having not really experienced the warm and excited welcome that they had expected, these girls all clutched their casket-shaped chests tightly and made their way to their new home. And of course, they were ordered into the care of the Ursuline nuns until they found respectable mates and got married. Now, a respectable mate in New Orleans back in the day was pretty hard to be found because this place was basically no man's land. Not much different today. Anyway, even so, these local men, they still don't want anything to do with these chicks. Few of them, if any, found their little happily ever after marriage that they thought they were coming to New Orleans for. Some of them got forced into marriages where they got beat and raped constantly. Others, upon finding themselves alone and unwed, were forced into prostitutions with hopes of saving enough money to get their asses back to where they came from. In the meanwhile, the French king finds out about all this madness and he is pissed. He demands that these girls be returned to France. Well, that's not happening. So the sisters of the Ursaline Convent take all the girls' stuff, all these little casket-shaped chests that everything they owned had been stuffed into, and they put everything on the third floor of the convent and had all the windows and the doors sealed shut, and they remained so at that time. But a short time later, when the nuns go back to the third floor, they found that all of the chests were completely empty. So they start searching every inch of the third floor, but nothing was ever recovered. The nuns were then suddenly stricken with the fear that these young girls might have been something other than what they said they were. At that point, the Ursuline nuns spared no expense in making sure that nothing ever left that third floor space again. They bolted the door shut. The nails to the windows were actually blessed by the Pope himself, then locked in place. Then, of course, you got the community down in the streets, and the whispering starts again, but this time the word vampire was starting to circulate. There was a very common fear that the girls had brought with them the spirits of the undead inside those little caskets. And upon arriving in New Orleans, they released those evil beings to feed upon the new colony. Now, the third floor had never been unsealed, and just like many other old buildings with very terrifying legends attached to them, no investigations have ever been allowed. However, in 1978, these two paranormal investigators were determined that they were going to find some answers to whether the Casket Girls had in fact been or had been delivered by vampires. So they camped out directly in front of the old Ursaline Convent at 1112 Charter Street. They'd already been kicked off of the property for loitering, but the street is public property. So they decided they were going to spend the night there and see if they experienced anything from the outside. So they set up all their equipment and stuff. Well, they sat there for hours until eventually they all pretty much passed out, fell asleep, whatever you want to call it. It is New Orleans. So while they're out cold, the third floor shutters, the very same ones that had been sealed shut by these blessed nails, start opening and closing and opening and closing. And how do we know that? Because the cameras caught it. It recorded it for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden they stopped working. Everything went black. The next morning, the bodies of those investigators were found lying in the street. They'd been torn open as if by the claws of some wild animal, and they'd been completely drained of blood. So I don't know, John Biggins, what do you think? Vampire or no? Ed Miller, get on him. I think vampire. But that's, again, just my opinion. I don't want to influence whatever it is that you guys are thinking. But let me know. Good to see you, Cindy. Thank you for joining in. Let me know in your comments, what do you think? Go back and listen to those dates again, because it's just really kind of crazy how those dates and names just kind of seem to keep popping up, even in these two separate legends. It is New Orleans, and there's a whole hell of a lot of legends in history here. A whole lot of craziness as well. So let me know what you think. Also, shoot me a message if you got a request for an upcoming show. And go to authorlyngibson.com. Check out those books, that blog, and all of those awesome sponsors that I just happen to have. You can also check out the Edge Radio US. Download that free Android app or stream for free online. Any songs that you would like to hear added onto the playlist, give me a shout. I got that kind of magic. I can make that happen for you. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream this evening. I see that I've started one hell of a debate over there in the comments on vampires, but that's the way I like it, so you guys just have it out. I'll get involved in that maybe in a little bit after I finish this glass of wine. Glenn, I hope you're doing well with your glass of wine. In the meanwhile, y'all have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday. At least I hope to see y'all here. Thank you again. Y'all have a wonderful evening. Creepy chick kisses coming at you.